everybody. Welcome to another episode of Reverse the Verse Live. This week, the environments of Alpha 3.5. And joining us on the show this week, we have an esteemed panel, some RTV newbies on, and one old hat. Let's take a few moments to get to know who our guests are, what they do for Star Citizen, and what type of questions we'll be dealing with today. Nick, why don't we start with you? Welcome to Reverse the Verse. Tell everybody who you are, Nick, and what you do for Star Citizen.
Hey, thanks. I'm Nick Etheridge. I'm the lead environment artist for the PU team for the UK studio. So I oversee basically the environment art team here in the UK, anything to do with the PU. So that covers space stations, landing zones, things like that.
Cool. And for Alpha 3.5, what were some of the things you were specifically involved in?
Yeah, so pretty much solely responsible. I mean, not solely as in it's just me, but my responsibility was ArcCorp. So ArcCorp Area 18, that landing zone. So that was a big job for specifically 3.5. Yeah, that was pretty much what I was on.
All right, Joel, you're up next. Welcome to your first time on RTV. Tell everybody who you are and what you do for Star Citizen.
Hey, cheers. I'm an environment artist on the PU team. For 3.5, I predominantly worked on the spaceport exterior, and then towards the end of the release, I did a bit of downtown work in Area 18 Central.
Cool. And so I know a lot of your work for Alpha 3.5 was related to the spaceport, right?
Yep.
Cool. And Luan, welcome back to Reverse the Verse.
Hello.
Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Thanks. So I'm Luan Viteretti. I'm one of the environment artists here as well on the UK team. So for 3.5, I was mostly responsible for the planet ArcCorp. So that's like the industrial areas, the downtown areas, the global part of ArcCorp, along with Pascal and the DE team. So together we just took that and tackled it and tried to make a really cool city planet for everybody.
Well, I think you succeeded, and we'll talk about that over the next hour. Today's show is about the environment art of Alpha 3.5. Now, as usual, we put up a thread collecting questions every single week, and as usual, there are a collection of questions that were appropriate for the subject and weren't appropriate for the subject. I know a lot of times folks' questions tend to veer towards design questions, gameplay questions, or things about the future. Our discussion for this week is about the art and the artists who make that art for Alpha 3.5. So we do want to try to keep the questions that come in live today to that subject. And if you submitted a question in the thread and saw that your question was deleted and whatnot, I promise we'll have more shows about the future in coming weeks. We just can't do one every single week. I got to spread the wealth. There are so many developers working on Star Citizen, over 505 studios around the world. I try to make sure everybody gets their time in the light, and we definitely want our artists because our artists are fantastic and they tend to bring the world of Star Citizen to life. And one more thing I want to get through. You three are here representing your team today, but the environment art team is much bigger than just the three of you guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone that worked on ArcCorp should be really proud. I think everyone worked really hard, not just the environment team, but the other teams that helped with the environment, such as UI with all the adverts, the props team. It would be quite empty without those teams. Audio with the soundscapes. I was thinking actually, what would ArcCorp look like if it had ad blocker on? And I think it would be a lot more a lot more empty and not as cool looking without all the neons and the adverts and stuff. So yeah, I think everyone, not just the environment team, they worked really hard, and I think everyone's pleased with the result.
Now I want to see a UI mod ad blocker and see what it does to the UI when your helmet visor blocks out all the advertisements.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a common thing. I wanted to bring it up because it's come up at a lot of side comments we've seen on Spectrum and stuff lately. you often see many of the same faces week in and week out on ATV or RTV, and sometimes that can lead to an impression that these are the only people who are working on these things, and we definitely have a wide and varied team, and it's even though we do 2 weekly shows, we still can't get everybody, 500 plus people in 5 cities around the world on the shows in front of you. So I just want to give recognition and support to all the people who don't get to be on ATV or RTV every week. Your work is absolutely appreciated, and I hope we represented well. All right, so we got a bunch of questions collected throughout the week. We are also taking questions live in the chat. You can submit your question by submitting it with the word question in capital letters surrounded by brackets ahead of it. That'll allow our community manager team to pull it out from all the other conversation that's going on. And we are going to start right off the bat with some of the questions from the thread. In the Lore Maker's Guide to the Galaxy, that was the episode that was on the Stanton system, ArcCorp was described as mostly, but not completely, built upon and having oceans as recommended by the scientists that we consulted to plausibly validate weather effects and stuff like that. What we see in 3.5 appears to have no oceans. Is that going to be the case going forward? What's going on with that?
I think that'll be a good one for Luan because he did a lot of the planet stuff.
Yeah, so when we're exploring these things early on, we take a lot of the lore into account. We see what is this thing, what parts of it can we do, what parts of it is going to require a little bit more research. And I think our main focus for 3.5 has really been taking the Planetech and trying to make a completely hard surface industrial buildings planet with it. So that our main goal was really to try and get the Planetech to do something quite different that it hadn't done before. So with that in mind, absolutely we can R&D all kinds of different things that could work with possible oceans and things like that. But our main focus is really trying to get this tech working in a way that would really benefit a whole city planet. And that required a lot of investigation into how we're going to scatter these things, how are we going to what kinds of biomes can we do with this in mind. So the first early on stuff that I did, actually I did some tests after SitCon 2017 on the industrial side of the planet, and I had sort of all kinds of different really random geometry and buildings being scattered around, and it was okay, so this is sort of we can definitely use it for these big industrial areas. So when we actually started tackling ArcCorp, it was okay, so I know that that's going to be one of the things we can do. Mm-hmm. So let's push that tech. Let's push the Planetech to do all these really cool big plates. And as you R&D, there's a lot of stuff that you go, ooh, it'd be cool if I tried a little bit of this here and then a little bit of this here. But obviously, as the more that you want to do, the bigger that the schedule gets. And obviously, there's only so much time to do these kinds of things. So we try to focus down on what are the main areas of ArcCorp and what can we do with the Planetech for this release.
Yeah, I think it was probably one of the most challenging things we've ever had to do, creating a whole planet covered in buildings. I mean, we did a lot of pre-production prototyping, tried different things with it, and we're using Luan could speak to this more, but we're using the Planetech, which was built originally for organic stuff, and it's actually easier to do the organic stuff like the terrain and mountain ranges and stuff, because your eye doesn't pick out things that you notice when it's hard surface, when it's all solid blocks of buildings. And that was one of the biggest problems, was trying to use a system that basically scattered rocks and other mass scattered objects and try and do that with buildings, because the first thing we found was it looked very jarring, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and another thing, trying to adapt that tech, was we knew we'd have to integrate with certain sort of more bespoke areas of ArcCorp. So, for example, with Joel, I worked quite closely when he was doing the prototyping the spaceport exterior. We work closely with like, okay, so what do these materials look like? What do we want out of these materials? So then he'd be like, oh, it'd be cool if we could do something like this. I'm like, yeah, actually, that could work on the industrial side of things. So, it's about sort of reaching out to the team and everybody that's working in ArcCorp and going like, okay, how is my stuff going to integrate with yours? And how is all of this going to work together to create sort of this focused tier 0 version of ArcCorp, essentially?
No, I will admit that after Lorville and getting all that work on, figuring out all this organic stuff, I was surprised isn't the word. I've been trying to think of what the word is, but I was impressed at the ambition of getting one planet organic and then switching to let's do the technological one first. I think other projects might want to crank out a couple organic things first, but we were like, nope, let's hit the challenges head on, and I'm really excited to see the results here. Let's continue talking about ArcCorp here. One of the questions was about what kind of things can we expect to find by exploring ArcCorp, since we now have this technologically covered planet, now or in the future. The suggestions they gave were abandoned cities, monolithic buildings, maybe ArcCorp has a shipwreck somewhere.
Yeah, sure. Maybe not abandoned parts of the city. I don't think that makes much sense for ArcCorp, but definitely like abandoned buildings and stuff like that work. We see stuff like that. We have the technology to do that with, say, underground facilities on other planets and moons. It would just be empowering, the mission feature teams to be able to create these missions, and then there might be a small amount of content to be created to embed these into ArcCorp properly. But definitely, like, we have the ability to do that, and we'll probably look into something in the future about that. Shipwrecks as well. We've got derelicts on moons and other planets. So again, we have the foundations to do it, and it'd be interesting to look into doing that for ArcCorp as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think whole abandoned cities is probably not with the law of ArcCorp, as it's like a corporate planet, and it's kind of hard to imagine. I mean, maybe if it's part of the law, but I would definitely see abandoned buildings, things like that, like slum areas that could be explored.
Yeah, I don't know. You could do abandoned cities. Disney World has an entire abandoned theme park. They got an entire theme park at Disney World, some old Animal Kingdom style park that they just closed down. They didn't bulldoze or anything. It's just closed. It's there. It's surrounded by water. It's on a lake. People still trespass to try to get pictures in there because it's all overgrown now. Disney was just like, yeah, we're not going to do it anymore, and we don't have anything to replace it with. So they literally just shut it down. And it's been abandoned for years, so not entirely out of the realm of possibilities. You mentioned the underground facilities, Joel. We see traffic now moving into and out of underground tunnels and everything. We had a number of questions come in about whether we'll ever see any underground areas on ArcCorp.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely room to move from having just one kind of area to walk around, Area 18, to having more of that. Like we said, we could definitely look into. We've got the buildings and we've got the rooftops, so we're kind of forward planning for potential mission locations, and there's no reason why exploring parts of a trench or something like that couldn't be something we do down the line. Obviously, we want to flesh out the whole of the Stanton system first. So we want to do Horizon, we want to do New Babbage. But there's no reason why we can go a bit deeper into ArcCorp and Area 18 and bits around, and even other sections of ArcCorp.
Yeah, Chris talked a bit about that on RTV a couple weeks ago, where it's we want to go through and get a first pass on all of Stanton first, and then go back through and see where we can touch up and add to the existing planets. So I think everybody can see a ton of possibility in ArcCorp. as far as as far as ground level stuff, deep under, deep slums. A number of questions came in about something for land vehicles to do. Either streets that we can drive upon, or even low-level street city races, kind of stuff like that. Lots of possibilities there when it comes time to come back around. Still probably too early to confirm. Next question says, ArcCorp buildings are great, but are there plans for additional variation in the future in terms of materials, colors, and texture quality? It's very red.
Yes, it is very red. There's been some great jokes about the guys who own the shares in red paint are quadrillionaires.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Mr. ArcCorp's nephew. It makes red paint exclusively.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, we had a billion and one things to think about when making ArcCorp, and definitely diversity, not just in color, but buildings, sizes, shapes, style. But we just wanted to keep it to a billion and one things, not a billion and two things. But it's actually something we've been actively working on now, not for 3.5, but for a patch release. So we're actually implementing more color variation as a array base for diversity, but we've been working on some more building types. So we're putting those in, and more tile variation. So different areas of city actually do look a bit more unique from other bits, and big kind of mega structures. Not as big as like the CBD of Hurston, but some more unique kind of areas, bit more circular shapes going on there. So hopefully with a post 3.5, there'll be some more things to discover and more interesting things to look at. So yeah, we totally get the criticism for that everything's being red, but we like I said, we had a million one things to think about. So with that, we played it kind of safe, but we have been implementing some more diversity to Area 18 and the other cities.
You have to start somewhere. And
Yeah.
I've seen some of that stuff that you're talking about, and that's why we have a meeting next Wednesday about getting some of that on ETV in the quarter, because I've seen some of that stuff, and I'm like, so I'm working on it, guys. Let's see, what else do we got? Let's talk a little science here. Where does ArcCorp's atmosphere come from? Are we thinking about introducing any parks, any biodomes, any greenery to the planet to make sense of the atmosphere up above?
Yeah, I think for the larger greener areas, we've definitely had some ideas and concepts for. I don't know if you want to go into a bit more on that, but I know there was a question about rooftop gardens and penthouse kind of things. It's another cool thing that when we created landing pad, like one of our goals was, we want to land on pretty much every building, at least every building that you can land on. So that's why we kind of came up with let's just make sure there's landing pads on all of the rooftops, and those are modular locations. So there's no reason why they always have to be landing pads. There could be a rooftop garden or a penthouse suite or something, or a swimming pool, whatever, as long as it fits in with the law and works in the location. We can swap out one of those rooftops for something maybe a little bit more interesting, a little bit more unique. So I definitely see the potential for rooftop gardens and more greenery there. I'll let Luan speak for the larger kind of parks and things like that.
Yeah, so when you do something like that, I've tried a couple of ideas out, and when you put something that interesting on the planet, how do you do it in a way that a player goes, okay, that's cool, that's a park there, and not in a way that the player goes, well, I'm gonna go there, because there's only so much resources that we can apply towards making something like that at high detail, in a way that holds up, in a way that there's reasons to go there. So it's definitely something we looked into, and something that we can look into. But it's all a matter of trying to see where our resources are and where we can spend it as smart as possible. I mean, you can definitely imagine, like, for the atmosphere of ArcCorp, there's probably some huge atmosphere processor somewhere, or a couple of them. Again, back in SitCon 2017, I tried a couple of things that didn't quite make it to the demo. There was this enormous structure, like 3 times the size of the Hurston CBD building, and I think there's I had like these, they were like arrayed in a way that it kind of looked like they could be atmosphere processors. But if you think about the resources that it would take to put something like that there, it's like, okay, we can spend some time and make that visual interest area of interest, or we could go ahead and focus a little bit more on what these buildings look like, on the quality of these buildings near Area 18, the tiles and things like that. But it's certainly something that we can look into, and it's something that I think it's definitely very interesting. I mean, I'd love to see some of that stuff, some of these parks and little green areas and just different pockets of color. They go, what could that be?
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to balance, because I understand the instinct to make these. When you've built a 360-degree planet, to just go in and spend all your time making it as detailed and as capable as something like Sky, like what would be the main world of something else. But we've got to make hundreds of worlds.
I mean, we would love to go deep into ArcCorp straight away, and if the game was just ArcCorp, we could make a whole game out of that. But it's more than that. It's lots of different planets to visit. So we gotta scale accordingly.
Yeah, it's got to be one of those things where it's like you hit this for a version, then you hit this for a version, then you hit this for a version, then you hit this for, and then somebody goes back through and they're going back for something while these people are moving on, and then another wave. It's almost going to be like a chorus.
Yeah, I mean, every location we look at, we obviously try to do more stuff than we probably eventually do. We've got tiers, and we say, like, this is something there are things that are must-haves. We need to have this kind of thing in, and then there are things that we can try and get it in now, or if it doesn't, then we can go back and get it in at a later date. We're always trying to future plan our locations, so there's stuff to continue with.
Now, in the last question, we brought up the CitizenCon 2947 demo. Obviously, there have been a lot of changes with ArcCorp from that demo to what it is now. And a lot of the questions come in to just simply want to know why that changed. Was it purely technical reasons? Was it artistic reasons? Was it performance reasons? What precipitated those changes?
Yeah, it was actually a bit of both, really. I mean, obviously there was an obvious difference in the art style of the buildings. That was just an artistic decision. We wanted to make the buildings feel a little bit more realistic. We were happy with the demo, but some of the buildings got very noisy and very top heavy and very kind of oddly shaped. So we kind of wanted to simplify them back a little bit. Some of the new buildings we are going to be putting in that I spoke about before are kind of like a little nod towards that slightly more that more of that style, but yeah, it was a artistic decision to simplify them a little bit. It actually helped us as well with performance, because we could put the detail where we wanted to. The old ones were like detail all over the building, so we kind of picked our battles and made sure we put the polys where we wanted to put them. And there was a little bit of technical as well, like with the demo. I mean, the demo was, the sun was in a fixed position, so we could show it off in the best light. When we actually started to look at, this is a rotating planet, we wanted it to look the best at all possible levels. We're thinking about, you're walking around in Area 18, the sun's moving around, you're flying around, you're on a transit system, you're at orbit. We're trying to get it to look the best in all situations, and if you concentrate just on, one level of detail, you could nail that and get it to look perfect, but then other levels of detail, it doesn't look so good. So there's a real balancing act, getting to look right. And the other thing was the demo was very, we used very much smaller tiles, so it was very grid-like. You could see the trenches kind of do these kind of zigzags. So we wanted to enlarge the tiles, make them slightly more bespoke in the sense that you're not recognizing like this kind of very it's kind of like very old school SimCity where it's like in small little things, and you can recognize this is a city block and that's the next city block, and kind of weird looking. So we kind of expanded the size of the tiles, and that allows us to do a bit more hero stuff with that, and some larger shapes. So I understand like art is always subjective, so I understand like if people are like, oh, we kind of like the old art style and compared to the new, it's all subjective. But there's a bit of both really, both artistic and technical reasons.
Okay. Joe, let's follow up on that. Obviously, frame rate is always a major consideration anytime we add something to Star Citizen, especially a giant city-covered planet. What are some of the tricks and optimizations that we're currently using to improve the frame rate in ArcCorp?
Sure, yeah. So we tried to use larger brushes to build these locations out. So in past locations, it could get very granular, like a hallway would be made of a lot of small pieces, and that would work well for these interior locations. But when you're on ArcCorp, the level in which you see these locations can vary from up close to, low atmosphere, and from very far away. So we had more view distances to consider when making these locations. So one of the approaches we used was to just combine a lot of these brushes into bigger brushes, so to reduce the draw calls, which is one of the main kills of frame rates would be draw calls. And we could get away with a lot more aggressive LODs because at a distance, ArcCorp, it's a planet full of a city, so it looks very busy on its own. So we could get away with a lot more aggressive lodding, because at a distance, the details just kind of blur in together, and you get just this big picture of a city. You're not really focusing on, there's this one tree out in the middle of the open, and I can see on one LOD state it's got leaves, on the next it doesn't. But because it's surrounded by like a lot of noise, we can go a bit more hard on our LODs as well.
Gotcha. Look, we got more stuff about ArcCorp coming, but I want to switch gears here for a little bit. Do some of the questions that are coming in live from the chat. Do you guys also? I know each one of you worked on ArcCorp specifically. Did you guys do any of the work on ArcCorp's moons?
No, that was entirely the DE team. So the Pascal, Patrick, all those guys over there pushing the Planetech. Now I worked with them to. I went to DE for some time and learned the Planetech. They came back here and took everything that I learned and worked with Pascal on how he did things in Walla, Lyria, whatever, Selen, Daymar, and took that and those things I learned and applied them to ArcCorp. But for us here, it was almost entirely focused ArcCorp.
Gotcha. All right, so we won't be able to get to a couple of the moon questions that are coming here, but I do want to ask one in case maybe the new moons, Walla and Lyria. Every time we do a patch, our work gets better, and these new moons look fantastic. I thought the old moons, Crusader's old moons looked fantastic, but these new moons, what can I say? Do you know of any plans that we're going to go back and use some of the new technology and the new techniques we've been using to update the older moons?
Well, you just said it yourself. Like every time we put a patch out, like something improves. We're always testing things in house. We're always like, looking at the Planetech and be, how can we improve this? How can we improve that? And we can definitely take the lessons we've learned from ArcCorp and pass it down to, the next planet and the next moon and the next, it just comes down to really the things that we can learn from this release and applying it to the next. So we're always improving these things, and there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't look into something like that. And the Planetech's evolving a lot and a lot fast because we need to be pushing out lots of planets. So it's all about learning these lessons with the way that we scatter objects, the way that we create different ecosystems, the way they blend together, the way that they colored, the way that the assets are colored. As a matter of fact, I tried some very organic style asset coloring in ArcCorp. So you could have areas of ArcCorp that were more driven by the global color. Mm-hmm. So you could have buildings that were more gray, buildings that were a little bit of green, a little bit of this. But the problem is because that deck was made for, the organic stuff, you'd get, it's not like you'd get a couple of nice panels that are green or a building specifically that's green. No, it's kind of just more of like this blurry gradient that just applied. But, with that, we can look into how we can tint these assets and go into the next moon of planet whatever and be like, okay, so we can do it this way. Let's try and push the tech this way. So by learning all those things, these moons will just inherently get better and better and better together as we go along. So it's definitely something we can look into.
You actually touched on something a little bit that is one of the questions that came in, one of my favorite questions that came in. How is the experience, now that we've made one organic planet, and now that we've made one covered in technology planet, were there lessons that we learned from making a technologically covered planet that could actually help us making organic planets in the future?
Well, absolutely. So early on when I was trying to figure out how some of these buildings would scatter, I looked into some of the way that they scattered the rocks, and I was in constant contact with DE about, I know we always say DE, but it's Germany. Only they would say DE.
The DE team, yeah.
The DE team.
Frankfurt.
But I was in constant contact with Frankfurt about, okay, so you, how would you guys array these rocks in a way that it would almost look like an actual formation of things? So all of the exploration that they took there, I applied onto ArcCorp. So now there's no reason that we can't take, okay, so we know we have these enormous meshes. I'm talking one of those plates is almost like, it's anywhere between 2 to 6 kilometers. Now it's scattered in a way that it goes a little bit more random. So it's like smaller, bigger, there's like levels to them. But there's no reason we can't take that information of that R&D and apply it to say we want to start scattering some enormous rocks somewhere in a planet somehow, some enormous cliff faces, I don't know, any kind of thing like that. All of the exploration that I do here also involves there, and all the exploration that they do there will, come back to us. And it's just like I said, right? Everything just improves with time together. It's all these little pushes. It's like you learn a little bit here, learn a little bit there, and that applies just outside of planets as well, right? Like you're doing R&D to how do we do materials for spaceport? Well, okay, I can do that in the ArcCorp buildings. I can do, how are we going to do windows there? Well, I can do that in the ArcCorp buildings, in the industrial areas. How are we going to do some of the VFX here? Well, the VFX is done this way. Let's push it in a way that can evolve into sort of maybe a planet that brings both of these elements together. So it's all about this R&D process that's just constantly happening in all kinds of levels.
Okay.
Yeah, you could almost flip the question the other way around, like I was saying earlier. Like it was how do we make a technological planet out of from an organic planet system? And just to add to what Owen said, we with the rocks and scattering and things like that, they would because scattering small rocks, you don't need to see small rocks further away, so they would lot out and disappear very quickly. But something we really had to push for was as soon as you make those small rocks buildings, it's like, well, you can't have a building a mile away just popping in. So we had to push that view distance for like miles and miles and miles out. So you got the horizon, and you're still seeing these buildings.
There was a time where I pushed it so far that for a week or so the editor was stalling and people trying to work in ArcCorp and I go, and I was just there like, I'm sorry, I was just trying some stuff.
One of the questions in the chat came in. It made me laugh. LODs, obviously, levels of detail. The things that big fancy model when it's up close, and then a slightly reduced model, and a slightly more reduced model, for anybody who doesn't know. How many LODs did you use in ArcCorp? Like, if you had the ballpark.
It's an interesting question.
The question came in, and I'm like, wow. Like, did you ever bother to count? Are we too afraid to count?
There will be a lot of LODs on the grand scheme of things. Like, there would be generally we have about 5 LODs per asset. So if you calculated all the LODs, 5 LODs per building, it gets big. But at the same time, with the procedural tech and the planet tech, we just have to LOD this building once, and then it's LODed there and it's LODed there, and we get a lot of reuse out of that one building. But it's definitely like a good portion of the time is doing these LODs and optimizing it. Obviously, if it's like an interior space that you don't really see from far away, we don't have to do 5 LODs, because even on low spec, you probably never see LOD 5 or LOD 4. But definitely the buildings, like, we went right up to the cusp so we could get the most draw range out of them.
And that goes back to the previous question as well, as about how we change the art style, and it's a bit of both, a bit of we just wanted to make it look like this, and a bit of performance. Well, the way that our LOD system works is, it's all about getting these very small polygons and averaging them out, and these buildings are pretty large. So one thing that we could take into consideration is like, okay, LOD 0, which is the most detailed that you see, would have still polygons that are large enough so that you see LOD 0 for just, actually quite some time, like maybe a kilometer, I don't know, like 500 meters. Whereas if we had lots of little details, lots of antennas, little polygons, little things, little cables, that thing within 2 meters would just go pop.
Yeah, we with for example, on the rooftops, so we've got the buildings and we've got these rooftops on them, and they're you can walk around them. So they're higher density polys and draw calls than the side of the building, because you can fly past the side of the building, but you can't walk on it. So it had to be high detail. But we got to make sure, because we've literally got thousands of rooftops in one city or a collection of cities. So, for example, around Area 18, and so we can't just, even with LODing. So basically, with each LOD, you need to reduce the amount of polys and draw calls. So with the lowest LOD, LOD 5, you're looking for it to be the most simplest object, like a box with one material, so one draw call. But even that, like, it still costs. If you've got thousands of these, it's still 1,000 draw calls. Right. So in addition to LODing, we made sure, like, things that were small and couldn't be seen from a distance, not only were they LODed, but they just disappeared when you didn't need to see them. So the rooftop has tons of railings going around, and I calculated we had about just one railing type. There was about 60,000 on ArcCorp or something like that. So
I mean, if you look at the planet and you see what the stats are saying, you're looking at millions of objects sometimes. It's
like
insane.
I think when we added ArcCorp in, we added over 100,000 entities into the PU, which was fun for the engineers. But yeah, like, so with the railings and small things, we make sure, like, because the railings are very thin piece objects,
exactly,
and from a distance, they get to like a pixel thin, and then you don't need to see them. So we set the view distances on those kind of objects very low. So if you're on one rooftop and you're looking over to another one, you're not going to see the railings anyway because they're really thin. So we don't draw them. We just turn them off. So it's those kind of tips and techniques and those things that will help even further than good LODs is one thing, but making sure we've got a system in place that doesn't even draw them is even better.
I want to shout out to the folks in chat who followed up with definitions of LODs and level of details and what they were. We have, between ATV and RTV, we've probably described what LODs are a dozen times over the last 2 years alone. So I gave a very brief description, so that's not to take too much time, but folks were still asking in chat came to the rescue of many folks. So thank you, chat, for participating.
Hey, maybe we do a whole show about LODs. How about that?
Well, just one more thing to add is something that we want to look more into is hierarchical LODs. So there's some probably guys that can give some definitions there, but basically the gist of it is instead of basically we will merge LODs together. So if you've got 5 buildings on a tile or 100 buildings in a city or whatever, the when you're up close to it, you're seeing the building at LOD 0, and the more further you get away, that LOD's down, but each building LOD's down, and then we will merge those buildings together as one mesh, which will then save more draw calls. So it's something that we want to get into more in the future.
All right, from LODs, I want to move on to one of the arch enemies of players driving surface-side vehicles across planets and moons, rocks. Let's talk about rocks for a second. A lot of questions. They've come in chat. It came in the thread. Folks wanting to know what our plans, if we have plans, have we thought about plans for changing the distribution of rocks on the surfaces of places like Lorville and, or I'm sorry, Hurston and the moons. Maybe even using something like density maps. It can become a chore from time to time to have to spend most of your time driving, avoiding rocks and not enjoying the beautiful vista that you guys have created because everybody's focused on avoiding rocks the entire time.
Yeah, so if you think about it this way, right? Let's say that we have to design a map, or texture map, that tells the ecosystem, there's more rocks here, less rocks here, and then within that system you have something else that goes, okay, these rocks scatter in this kind of way. You're actually talking about a lot of man hours actually making this content, when in reality what we want to do is we want to make as much of that procedural as possible, right? So as we evolve this tech, as we take like I said before, as we take these lessons that we learned and we make the tech better, this stuff is going to come back to the moons, and we're going to definitely start addressing some issues or even introducing others, because you can never predict how these things are going to go. But it's really about how can we make this as expandable and scalable as possible. So right now, there's a few ways that we can scatter rocks, but we're definitely looking into how we can make that system more procedural and more even fun, both visually and gameplay wise for the player. And it's definitely something we're looking into.
All right, so I'm going to get back to some of the questions in the thread now. That was good news about rocks. I don't get to play as often as I'd like, but when I do get in there, and I was excited to jump into my Ursa, and I had trouble with the rocks. So I've been waiting for a show where I can ask somebody. So I might have slipped that one in there myself. Back to the thread here. There's ArcCorp is an amazing accomplishment. Well, thank you, sir. I'll take all the credit for that. Technically and artistically, but with such a massive space, even the diverse assets you've built can start to feel repetitive as you explore a few hundred kilometers outside Area 18. Do we have any plans to create the equivalent of biome diversity for ArcCorp?
Yeah, so right now what you're seeing in the simplest of terms, you're seeing an industrial area and a populated area. So within this industrial area, I looked into it, I was like, okay, we can have a more plated area. We can have a more dense building area with more chimney stacks. So maybe that's something that the player can fly around. But as we develop these things, we try a few different things, and we go, okay, maybe there's an area with some really large buildings, some atmosphere processors. Maybe there's an area with almost nothing. It's just flat. It's almost like a desert, but of machine-made objects. So again, it's a question of, okay, we have all these things we want to do. Let's pick what the best representation of ArcCorp at its base level is. And for us, that right now, that is these big plated industrial areas, some pockets of more lots of pipes and chimneys, and this more dense industrial situation that you got going on there, and then some really low suburbs, and then some more downtown-like suburbs. So as you look at the around Area 18, you're going to see some really sort of flat suburbs, and then you're going to see some bits that raise up a bit and raise down, raise up and down. And that's our idea of biome diversity for ArcCorp. It's like, how can we take this these different ecosystems and blend them in a hard surface kind of way. But yeah, it's just about focusing on what we want ArcCorp to be right now. There's no reason we can't look into other things. So yeah.
I mean, yeah, to add to that, I mean, like mentioned before, we're looking into some more unique kind of superstructures and buildings. And at the moment, it's more, I think, for me anyway, it's more about giving more meaning to going to an area. Like, why would I want to fly to the industrial area? Because I think Loan did a really good job on that. But at the moment, there's no reason to go there. So we want to give the life designers and the mission designers the tools to be able to, plunk an area down and go, okay, here's a cool mission to do. So again, we've got the really early instances of that with like Pachico's missions and some drop-off areas. But going forward, we want to have a bit more areas to go to, and we want to show off these superstructures, industrial areas, and give meaning to it. So with like the procedural tools that we're using to generate the interior of space stations and things like that, that's where we're kind of looking into working with life design to create interesting locations and reasons to go there.
Joel, I got a couple questions here I think will probably be up your alley. Right off the bat, I know a lot of your work focused on the starport. What lessons did we learn from Lorville's starport that we took and incorporated when building ArcCorps?
Sure, yeah. I guess when we first started the spaceport in ArcCorp, we looked at what we did with Lorville, and one of the things we wanted to do was have a bigger read from further away. So there was clear sections for landings and clear sections for what size ship you are as well. So as you make your approach, you can start to adjust accordingly. But that's twofold as well. That's number one, that's just for a bit more visual clarity, that it's a lot more open, but also for performance as well. It aligned to what we were doing with the rest of the structures, like Luan was saying, where the old buildings and stuff like that, very dense, they load out really quickly. So these larger structures obviously help with visual read from a distance, but they also play nice in optimization and just being able to be drawn from further away.
Okay. And then a follow-up question here. We had a couple questions coming in about additional larger or unique buildings, like the CBD obviously stands out on Lorville. Questions came in about, are there any plans for larger social buildings like they specifically mentioned concert halls or super clubs. I don't know what a super club is compared to a club.
Super
What
club.
makes a club a super club? That take advantage of the city view. Basically, more large-scale areas for player congregation where a bunch of people can get together and view out over our court.
Yeah, we like with some of the new buildings, we've got an interesting building which has the landing pad isn't on the roof; it's actually on the side of the building, which is quite cool. And coupled that with, let Luan talk about this because he actually did this. It's a really cool circular donut building.
So I spent some
mega
last week
structure.
looking into maybe introducing some different buildings. Now this isn't more of a tall building. We're talking more something that spreads out a bit. But I made this what we call the donut building, or the donut tile. And in my headcanon, it's ArcCorp's headquarters for Dunkin' Donuts. But as I developed that, which hopefully it will be something that you see shortly after 3.5. As I developed it, I was thinking about, well, what is this kind of place? You can definitely see it from space. You see something circular over there, and what is this space used for? So at first, I thought it might be some sort of stadium, or a concert hall. Actually did cross my mind, but I figured it's like this sort of bustling center of commerce maybe, and there's no reason why in the future we can't develop areas like this for live design to go, hey, let's add lots of like a shopping center there, or let's add a mission there. It's all about fleshing out giving the live designers a toolbox, or a place to play and invent missions and areas. So it's all about fleshing out the stand-in system and what we have now, and creating these interesting places they can go to, right? So so this donut building should be pretty cool. I like it. I hope everybody else likes it too.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
It was something that we actually planned to do originally, and we had it white boxed in when we had the whole city, but we wanted to focus on the other buildings, so we kind of put that on the back burner, like with some of the variants. And so we're gonna add it in for a post 3.5, and in a way it's a shame we didn't get that in, but in a way it's quite cool for guys to get an update, and it's like, oh, there's some cool new structures in post release, and you can see it evolving and updating.
Yeah, I saw the donut building in what I was looking at. And we keep calling it a donut building, but I mean it's a circular building. If folks who have been following the project for a long time remember early ArcCorp concept art that had these circular buildings. So many people were kind of lamenting the loss. So I'm glad to hear that they're coming back.
That was precisely the kind of stuff we looked at. I was like, oh, remember those old donut buildings? How can we bring it back? So
yeah. I think it's a good breakup visually from all the. From all the
it's from a distance. It's really good to see some different shapes going on when you're flying around. Definitely.
So this one's probably going to be a little theory-crafty, but I'm going to ask it. Chris talked about a potential future where players could rent buildings or own buildings, for player housing or possibly even org housing. And this question follows up on that. Would we consider the possibility of allowing owners to visibly change the exteriors of their buildings? Maybe even add a giant hologram of their own org logo? Or what about interior customizations?
I really like that question, actually. I see it as the same idea behind Habs. When we play owned Habs, and we're getting the very early first instance of persistent Habs now. So you can take an object and put it in your Hab, and it will stay in your own Hab.
Turtle.
Like a turtle. But so I see these as the same kind of thing. So there's no reason why we couldn't do things like org-owned buildings with objects that we can place, or that the players can place, and they would stay there. So I'm not sure when we would be doing this, but it's definitely something we'd want to do, because we want it to be more like with the Habs, more customizable, and people to make it their own home, and it not look like everyone else's. So you can go into someone's Hab, or you go into someone's building, and it's like, oh, where'd you find that thing? Where'd you get that turtle from?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's a really cool idea.
And it's not just turtles. I saw an image on Twitter this morning of a teddy bear on the dash of somebody's
Oh
ship,
yeah,
and I was like,
Hey, you want to talk about cool ideas with LODs, by the way, with the turtle? The turtle's like that, right? I guess it's more of a tortoise. LOD 0 for the tortoise.
there's a big argument about that.
Well, okay, but listen, the turtle's like this, and then LOD 1 for the turtle, it's in its shell. So as it transitions the LODs, you can see it just come back into its shell. That's the thing that was that they did with the props. So quite cool.
There's another turtle. I think there's two. One's a turtle and one's a tortoise, but
Okay.
one of them doesn't go into its shell, and if you look at it, it slowly swivels its eye towards you, which was quite funny. There's a good job by Steve Egan on the props team. He did those turtle.
Yeah, using LODs creatively.
Yeah, really nice asset actually.
yeah. Well, until it starts moving around and players have to chase it and bring it back, I'm not ready to call it fauna yet. So, you tell them that's my personal challenge to them. Until it can move around on its own, I got to chase it. I'm considering it like a genetically grown replicant turtle. That's my headcanon. It's not real until it can move. All right, we are almost out of time, so I want to get through. We've got quite a few questions. I want to see if we can't bullet round a few of these, get some of these in there. Are we going to see space stations in orbit above Hurston and ArcCorp? We saw one of those in the CitizenCon 2947 demo, or maybe even skyhook stations that are tethered to the surface.
It's actually something Joel's working on right now.
Yeah, it's definitely variants of the stations are on the roadmap and something we're working towards. It'd be cool to get these space station like dry docks around ArcCorp for say larger ships like the Hull series that they don't have to go down to the atmosphere. They could land at these dry docks and ferry their goods to there, and then smaller ships can take it down to the planet and vice versa. Definitely stations are getting looked at.
Yeah, it's something. The idea is that every major landing zone, like Lorville, like Area Team, will have a cargo station or port station in orbit. So you'd be able to drop off like big things that, like the whole variants that have trouble flying in atmosphere would not not need to go all the way down to do their runs. They could drop it off at a cargo station and then someone else or a part of the org could do the rest of the journey and take that in.
Cool. Any chance of getting panoramic elevators in ArcCorp to see on the outside of on the buildings when people go up and down?
Yeah, I really like that question as well because I think it's a good idea. It's definitely something we want to look into. There's no reason why we wouldn't be able to do that. Another thing similar, but another thing we're looking into is actually having windows in HABs so we can look out and have like views there. Exactly. It's definitely something we want to push for when we for Horizon, because the views there are going to be great. But it was something we were looking into originally with ArcCorp, but it was another thing we put on the back burner, but definitely something to revisit. Yeah, like there's no reason why. Again, I don't think this would be everywhere, but certain like hero locations or buildings could have its own external elevator. There's definitely some great real world examples of that around the world. So you could have a panoramic view.
Now, HABs with windows, if not every HAB has a window, or even if they did, but they'd have potentially different views and whatnot. So it would make certain HABs more valuable for others. It becomes a bragging rights thing. It's like my player, look at the view from my player HAB, and JJ's player HAB would be facing a brick wall. It's like my view sucks, kind of thing. So it's just one more thing for players to strive to achieve in Star Citizen. Has there been any discussion about seasons potentially changing the look of planets like ArcCorp or Hurston?
What does autumn in ArcCorp would look like?
Mhm.
I want to see snow on ArcCorp.
Snowy ArcCorp. That'd be cool.
Yeah, like something like weather systems is something we do want to look into, but I'm gonna leave it there.
Finally, before I let you go, because I know we're at time, and I promised I'd let you go on your Friday. Thank you for staying late for this, as always. How fun is it creating environments for Star Citizen? And let's just start there, and then we'll go to the second part. Do you enjoy your jobs?
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's fun. It's interesting because it's really challenging. Like as I said, like ArcCorp is probably one of the most challenging things I've ever worked on. But that makes it fun because you're not just doing paint by numbers, like if people know what that is. You're not just doing kind of like a routine thing. You know what you're doing, and it's like, okay, I'm going to work, and this is what I do every day. It's you come to work and you're like, okay, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to figure it out? Because it's when we started on looking at ArcCorp, it's like we were just like, okay, like this is an interesting problem, how to cover a whole planet with buildings. So I'm diverting the question a bit, but for me that's what makes it fun, like the challenge of it. We're pushing boundaries, we're trying to do things that haven't been done before, and that's the reward and where the fun comes from for me.
I mean, the challenge is, I think that pretty much hits the nail on the head. Well, to a certain degree, where it's the challenge of figuring out how the hell we're gonna do a city planet. Like you sit down in the meeting room and your art director and your lead come to you and be like, by the way, you're gonna be doing the planet that's covered by cities, and you go, excuse me. That challenge is is quite exhilarating. It's just such an insurmountable thing to figure out. And when you finally see it, and players are playing it and having fun, then that's the reward, and that's what's so really exciting for me. Joe, maybe you have different.
Yeah, it's like definitely the scale of things is challenging and can be daunting. But again, it's what excites me as an environment artist. Just the sheer scale and how we're gonna do it. Like everything starts as like a blank canvas, and it's like take this blank canvas and populate an entire planet with city. So it's never a dull moment.
Yeah. It's one of those things where if you're truly working on something that's unique, and you're truly working on something that's new, and you're truly working on something that's groundbreaking and that's never been done before, there isn't an instruction manual. There isn't anything else you can look at and say, oh, that's how they did it, and we can do something like that. It's you guys have to create a lot of solutions from scratch, and it's always impressive, or at least from my perspective, to see how you guys tackle these things and accomplish it on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis. So,
Thanks.
All right, guys, that's it. You survived. Nick and Joel, you survived your first RTV.
The first time, yeah.
I hope it wasn't too bad for you. I hope you enjoyed it.
It's a lot more light this time, isn't it, Jared? Well, Ian had everything off and just like a lamp.
It's Ian.
We'll leave it at that. Luan, Nick, Joel, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here with us on RTV this week. That's it. That's all I got. I don't have any special messaging. I don't have any announcements. I don't have anything. Oh, actually, I do have one. Subscribers, if you're a subscriber, remember the subscriber program, check your inboxes. On May 17th, we are doing a special Reverse the Verse Live with a live studio audience here in the studio. We got about 40 spaces available. It's going to be on a first come, first serve. The event is on May 17th. Signups will be on May 3rd. I don't have a specific time. We will get you the time when signups start ahead of time. We'll announce it on the show that's on that day. And of course, we'll post about it in the subscriber forums, and we'll probably even send out an email. So we'll make sure the information gets to you one of many different ways. But I'm excited. It's going to be the first time we're going to be able to take questions live from people here in the studio. And that's just something new and exciting to do. So yeah, for RTV, that's Nick, that's Joel, that's Luan, I'm Jared. That was JJ in the back. That was Tyler with the questions. We'll see you next week, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. For the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42, you can subscribe to our channel, or you can check out some of the other shows, and you can also head to our website at www.robertsspaceindustries.com. Thank you very much for watching.